My name is Juanita Westmore, 32 years old. I had one hand on the brass doorknob and the other wrapped around the handle of my carry-on when the house exhaled a sound I'd heard 1,000 times and never truly listened to. The faint, papery hush of our bedroom door closing upstairs. Then his voice drifted through the air vent, easy and bright, the tone he used on clients and waiters and anyone he needed to charm. "Yeah, she just left for the airport," he said, as if he were ordering flowers. "The Paris story worked. She bought it." A laugh followed, soft and intimate. My breath snagged. He sounded happy. I didn't move, not even a blink. The foyer's marble sent a chill through the leather soles of my shoes. I could see my reflection in the entry mirror. Lipstick neat, hair pinned, suit the color of midnight, an executive on the verge of a transatlantic flight. Through the vent, his voice unfurled again, louder now, pacing the floor above me, our bedroom, our sheets, our vows. "By the time she gets back in 3 days, it'll all be done," he said. "Papers are ready. Her mother's house will be in foreclosure by Friday. The old woman won't even know what hit her." My mother's house. The suitcase tilted from my grip and thudded onto the marble. I caught it before it fell completely, fingers steadying out of reflex, before the rest of me had decided whether to stand or collapse. I could see yesterday in a flash. His palm warm on my cheek, his kiss lingering, his "text me when you land, babe." A bead of water ran from the hydrangeas by the door and burst on the floor like a tiny, pointless meteor. Upstairs, his voice dropped to a tone I didn't recognize. Acid, coiled, feral. And the best part? She signed everything herself, every document. She thanked me for handling the family finances. After all these years of pretending to love that frigid, boring woman, I'm finally getting what I deserve. He paused, a smile audible in the silence. "What we both deserve, baby." Baby. My heart shrank to a hard, bright kernel. He wasn't alone in that sentence, and he wasn't talking to me. I stared at the front door, at the thin line of daylight sneaking around its edges, and tried to remember how to breathe. 8 years. 8 years of shared coffee mugs and Sunday laundry, of anniversaries with candlelight and rain-slick sidewalks, of holding him when his so-called deals fell apart and he swore he'd try harder. 8 years, and I didn't know the man upstairs. I lifted the suitcase back into its poised, casual angle. My hand no longer shook. It was eerie, the calm that arrived, clinical, almost cool, as if some executive inside me took the wheel and slid all grief into a folder named Later. He didn't know I was here. He believed my Uber was halfway to TSA and my mind already on a Paris presentation, which meant I had time, 3 days, while he celebrated my absence, 3 days to become someone he didn't think existed. I eased the door closed without letting it latch, let the soft click be swallowed by the air conditioner's hum, and stepped into the garage. The Lexus started with a purr I'd once found comforting. Now it sounded like an accomplice. At the end of our tree-lined street, the light turned green on its own, as if the city itself had decided, go. I didn't go to the airport. The coffee shop 3 blocks away had tinted windows and a backlot that faced a brick wall. I pulled in where no one could see my plate from the street, then gripped the steering wheel until the pain in my hands convinced me I was still attached to a body. Paris could wait. The board could wait. My life could not. I dialed my assistant. "Rebecca." "Juanita, I thought you were boarding." Change of plans. My voice was level. That surprised both of us. "I need you to tell the conference I had a family emergency. I need you to tell everyone I'm in Paris and unreachable except by email. And I need you not to ask questions until I can answer them." A breath. Rebecca had been with me 5 years. She could read a quiver in a comma. "Understood," she said quietly. "You're in Paris." "Thank you." I ended the call before the part of me that wanted to cry could ask for permission. Next, my mother. She picked up on the 4th ring, voice soft with the thinness that had appeared after my father died. "Sweetheart, did you land?" "I'm boarding. I just needed to ask. Those papers Adrian's been helping you with, your mortgage, the accounts, do you have copies?" "Oh, honey, Adrian keeps it all in a folder for me. He said it's easier that way. He's such a help." In the silence after "such a help," I could hear the espresso machine wheeze and hiss. Mom, I said, choosing each word as if it were a step over a ravine. Can you go to the bank tomorrow morning? Ask for a complete statement of all accounts and have them check the mortgage status, just to be safe. Juanita, is something... I'm just being careful. Please. A pause, the sound of her trust moving toward me across a line. All right, she said, if you say so. I do. I hung up, then pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and let one single tremor pass through me, like lightning grounding into earth. Then I opened my notes app and made a list. Everything he touched. Everything I'd ignored, because love is a centrifuge. It spins out details you should examine and labels them devotion. Joint checking, savings, investments. The consolidation he'd suggested 2 years ago. My mother's accounts. The house. Phone records. Paris had a schedule. I had one now too. 9 bullets, each a door I would open. I drove north. Veronica's lake house sat 2 hours from the city, where the water made a cathedral out of the sky and the neighbors were seasonal, inattentive. She was in Japan for 2 weeks. Her spare key lived in a ceramic duck by the back steps, an inside joke from college. The house smelled like cedar, lemon oil, and empty time. I dropped my luggage in the guest room and set my laptop on the kitchen table like a scalpel on a tray. First incision. Our joint accounts. Passwords rolled off my fingers. Balances looked normal, even generous. That was the first wrongness. Real chaos smears fingerprints. Calculated theft wipes the glass. I scrolled back through transactions, line by line. Small transfers, monthly, tidy. Numbers you'd overlook if you were busy closing a contract or congratulating your husband for making dinner. 2,000 here, 1,500 there. The same destination account, masked but consistent. Over 24 months, the trickle became a trench. I did the math 3 times because disbelief can mimic arithmetic. $347,000 gone. I wrote down the masked account number and kept cutting. The investment portal greeted me with a modern font and smug charts. Portfolio total, $1.2 million. Drill down. Ownership. 1 name, not mine. Primary, Adrian Bennett. The legalese I'd signed during that consolidation, his streamlining, sat in the document center, shining with its perfect grammar. I wasn't co-owner. I was a beneficiary upon his death. My hands went cold in a way that felt prehistoric, as if some animal in my marrow recognized a trap and thrashed. Breathe. Keep going. My mother's bank required more steps, but identity theft has a cousin named Daughter who knows her mother's first pet and high school mascot. The checking account balance blinked up, $12,200. The savings account, closed 3 months ago. Mortgage status, delinquent. I pulled the foreclosure docket from the county site. Auction scheduled for Friday. 2 days. The world narrowed to a single corridor of now. I made it to the bathroom just in time. When there was nothing left to surrender, I rinsed my face and looked at the woman in the mirror. She looked back like she'd been waiting her whole life to be asked a hard question. The family phone plan was in my name. I logged into our carrier and saw call logs like a constellation. One number glittered everywhere. Morning, midnight, lunch. 18 months. I ran it through a reverse lookup. Melissa Hartley, 28. Waterford Towers. Instagram offered a highlight reel of champagne and sunsets, handbags that cost as much as a semester of college, captions about manifesting abundance. In one window reflection, a familiar watch glinted on a man's wrist. Another photo was taken at a beach he'd said was a real estate conference in Miami. I recognized the hotel towels. He had a real name too. I didn't know it yet, but the outline was forming. A man who built himself out of lies the way other men framed houses. He'd chosen me for my grief and my inheritance. He'd chosen my mother for her trust. And he'd chosen a word, baby, for someone else. The vent had carried it to me, like a courier who didn't understand the package he delivered would explode. I called Jade, college roommate, now a private investigator, the kind who could find a birth certificate buried under 6 privacy services. "How's Paris?" she said. "I need your help," I said, and told her everything. I didn't say his name until the end, as if naming him might feed him. When I finished, the lake had darkened into a sheet of iron. Jesus, Elle, she breathed. I'll start now. Give me until morning. Thank you. After I ended the call, I stood at the window and watched wind pull a path across the water's skin. I thought about vows spoken under chandeliers while my mother cried into a linen handkerchief, about the house where I had learned to read and where my father had laughed, about the hydrangeas dripping in my foyer when he planned foreclosure between sips of coffee. Rage came back, not as fire, but as math. I made another list. Lawyers to call, banks to move, locks to pick, lies to turn into evidence. When I finally lay down, the lake kept breathing, and I matched it, inhale for wave, exhale for wave, and counted the hours I had left. 3 days. He thought I was on a flight. He thought he knew exactly when I'd return. He thought trust meant blindness. He didn't know me at all. I didn't sleep that night. The lake kept whispering against the dock, and each ripple sounded like the ticking of a countdown clock. When dawn finally bled into the sky, the world looked bruised, pale purple clouds stretching thin over steel-colored water. My laptop was still open on the kitchen table, its blue light staining the walls. I hadn't realized how long I'd been sitting there until my neck ached and my coffee had gone cold. I replayed Jade's last words in my head. Give me until morning. Now it was morning. I showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater. Neutral colors, practical. My hands trembled as I poured a fresh cup of coffee. The reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger wearing my face. The woman in the glass didn't blink or smile. She simply waited. When my phone rang, I jumped. Jade's name flashed across the screen. Juanita, she said, breathless. You were right. It's bad. Tell me. She didn't soften it. Adrian Bennett doesn't exist. His real name is Adrian Kane. He served 3 years in federal prison for fraud and identity theft. He got out 7 years ago, changed his name, and rebuilt himself from scratch. The real estate business? A shell. Every company he's ever listed has been dissolved or fake. My stomach twisted. And Melissa? Melissa Hartley's not just a mistress. She's his partner. They've been running this scam for years. He targets wealthy women, wins their trust, drains them dry, and then disappears. Melissa handles the fake accounts, the offshore transfers, the paper trails. My hand went numb around the coffee cup. How many victims? 4 that I can confirm. 1 declared bankruptcy, 1 vanished, 1... Her voice faltered. 1 killed herself 2 years ago. I pressed my palm against the countertop, steadying myself. What was her name? Jennifer Adams. He married her under yet another alias. The pattern's the same every time. God, the word came out hollow. Juanita, he's dangerous, Jade said. Not physically violent, maybe, but psychologically? He's a predator. You need to go to the police right now. I can't, not yet. What do you mean, not yet? I need proof. Solid proof. The police won't move fast enough, and he'll destroy everything before they even get a warrant. He still thinks I'm in Paris. I have 3 days before he notices anything. Juanita, this isn't a movie. I know, I said softly. That's why I'm going to make sure the ending is real. There was silence on the line, the kind that feels like someone deciding whether to stop you or let you fall. Then Jade sighed. Okay. If you're going to do this, you need help. I can send you tools, resources, a lockpick kit, encrypted drives, a data scrambler. Send everything to the lake house address. Overnight delivery. Juanita? Please, Jade, you trust me, right? A long pause. Always. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, watching the steam rise from my coffee until it vanished. I felt like that steam, dissolving, reforming, changing shape entirely. I opened my laptop again. If Adrian was a con artist, there would be layers to his web. Fake corporations, forged documents, offshore accounts. I knew his pattern now. The next step was following the money. By noon, I had built a timeline of transfers. Over the past 18 months, he and Melissa had funneled my money into 3 main accounts, each linked to a holding company registered under different names, but sharing one common detail: a post office box in Miami. I traced that box to a business registration office that specialized in international shell corporations. I sent screenshots to Jade with a single line: find who opened these accounts. Then I moved on to my mother's house. The foreclosure notice still sat open on the county website, sterile and official. My father's name, crossed out. My mother's signature, blurred by a scan. And under representative handling property transfer, the name of a law firm I'd never heard of. one that, according to its own website, specialized in discrete asset management. A front. I'd bet my life on it. I called the bank next. Riverside Financial, this is Angela. Hi, Angela. I'm calling on behalf of my mother, Linda Westmore. She's been a client for over 30 years. I need to confirm the current status of her mortgage. I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't release. I didn't let her finish. My mother is 82 and currently hospitalized. I'm her daughter, and I have her authorization letter. I just need to know if there's an active foreclosure proceeding. A pause, keys clacking, then a soft intake of breath. Yes, ma'am. The account is in pre-foreclosure. Auction date scheduled for Friday. I closed my eyes. Can you tell me who filed the notice? It appears to be filed through Westbrook Holdings. There it was. The same shell company I'd seen in Adrian's transfers. Thank you, Angela, I said, forcing my voice steady. You've been very helpful. When I hung up, the tears came fast and hot, not out of grief, but fury. Fury for every night I'd cooked dinner while he pretended to pay bills, every smile he'd given my mother while planning to steal her home, every I love you he'd said with a mouthful of lies. By evening, the lake house had transformed into a war room, papers spread across the table, sticky notes marking timelines, account numbers, addresses. My notebook filled with details. Miami, Shell Corporations, Melissa Hartley, Westbrook Holdings. I was still writing when my phone buzzed again. Jade had sent me a document folder. Inside were scanned files, Adrian's old mugshot, court transcripts, and a list of his known aliases. The photo hit me hardest. The man in it was younger but unmistakable. The same blue eyes, the same sculpted confidence. But without his smile, he looked reptilian, cold-blooded. Jade's message followed. You weren't married to a man, Elle. You were married to a business plan. That night, I took the lockpick kit she'd sent and practiced on the bedroom door until I could open it in seconds. The sound of the click gave me a strange satisfaction, a reminder that locked doors were just illusions waiting for skill. At some point, exhaustion claimed me. When I woke again, the clock read 2:13 a.m. The lake outside was black glass, the moon smudged into its surface. I couldn't shake the image of Melissa's perfect smile on social media, her champagne glass tilted toward my stolen life. I opened my laptop one more time and started a new folder, Operation Retribution. Inside it, I organized every piece of evidence, every screenshot, transaction, email, and phone record. Then, just before dawn, my phone lit up with another message from Jade. Jade, you're not going to like this. He forged more than your financial papers. Some of the signatures on your company documents look fake. I'm sending them now. The files arrived seconds later, copies of ownership transfers, signed in my name. My stomach turned to ice. The dates matched the months when I'd been buried in client negotiations, signing dozens of forms a week. He'd slipped his forgeries right into my real paperwork. Juanita, what does this mean? Jade, if he files these before you stop him, he could claim majority control of Westmore Analytics. Legally, you'd have no company left. Juanita, when? Jade, Monday. Everything he's doing points to Monday. Monday, that gave me 5 days. 5 days to save my company, my mother, and everything my father built. 5 days to outsmart the man who'd spent years studying me. I stared out the window, the reflection of dawn creeping into the lake. The fog glowed faintly pink, like a secret burning through. He wanted to strip me of everything I owned, my house, my mother's home, my company, my dignity. But he'd made one critical mistake. He thought I was still the woman who believed him. I picked up my phone and started drafting messages. One to my lawyer, one to my accountant, one to Jade. My mind clicked through possibilities like gears finding their place. If he wanted a performance, I'd give him one. When the sun finally climbed over the horizon, I looked at my reflection again. The woman in the glass didn't look like steam anymore. She looked solid, unforgiving. I whispered to her, "You've already lost everything once. Now make sure he loses more." Morning sunlight cut through the blinds like thin blades, scattering stripes across the table cluttered with papers. I'd been awake for hours, combing through documents until the lines blurred together. Somewhere between the printed bank statements and the crumpled napkin covered in notes, I realized I hadn't eaten in almost a day. I poured myself black coffee, no milk, no sugar, and watched the lake shimmer through the kitchen window. It looked peaceful. Deceptively so. My phone buzzed. Jade again. Juanita, I traced those shell corporations, she said before I could even greet her. 3 of them tie back to a brokerage in Miami that specializes in offshore accounts. Guess who signed the setup forms? Melissa Hartley, I guessed. Bingo. She's the administrative contact on all of them. And get this, one of the directors listed on a related company is A. Kane. He didn't even bother using an alias there. The air around me thickened. He's gotten sloppy. Overconfident, Jade corrected. That's when they make mistakes. But you'll need proof you can show in court, or, at the very least, to the feds. I'll get it, I said, staring at the lake. He's too arrogant to hide it all perfectly. Juanita, promise me something. Don't confront him alone. I won't, I lied. After we hung up, I opened Melissa's social media page again. She'd posted a new photo just 10 minutes ago. Brunch at a rooftop restaurant. The caption reading, "Sundays are for winners." A diamond ring gleamed on her right hand, the same hand that had likely forged my name on documents. My pulse quickened. I zoomed in on the background. The skyline, San Diego. She wasn't in Miami, she was here. It took less than 10 minutes to find the restaurant's address. Waterford Towers, top floor. Adrian's favorite steakhouse used to be in the same building. A nauseating thought crossed my mind. How many of our date nights had been rehearsals for meetings with her? I grabbed my keys. The elevator ride to the restaurant was quiet except for the hum of the machinery and my heartbeat in my ears. When the doors slid open, I walked into a world of glass and gold accents. Everything sparkled, the kind of place built for people who wanted to be seen. I spotted her instantly. She sat by the window, blonde hair catching the sun, laughter spilling from her lips as she scrolled through her phone. I didn't approach. Not yet. Instead, I walked past her table, pretending to search for someone, then slipped into a seat at the bar with a clear view of her reflection in the mirror. From here, I could study her without being noticed. She looked exactly as I'd imagined. Beautiful, young, confident. The kind of woman who believed the world bent for her because it always had. But there was something else, too. A twitch in her smile, a glance over her shoulder every few minutes. Paranoia. Guilt, maybe. Or fear that her golden ticket might expire. When she finally left, I followed her down to the parking garage. From a distance, I watched her unlock a sleek silver Mercedes and drive toward the luxury condos by the harbor. I took a photo of her license plate and sent it to Jade with a message. She's local. Find her apartment number. By the time I returned to the lake house, Jade had already replied. Jade, Unit 1802, Waterford Towers, leased under Westbrook Holdings. Of course, the same company trying to foreclose my mother's home. I closed my eyes, breathing in through my nose, out through my teeth. Every thread led back to the same web. That night, as rain pattered against the roof, I started outlining what I needed. Proof of their partnership, proof of the money trail, and something undeniable linking them both to the forgery. If I could get either of them to slip, to admit even one thing, I could bury them legally. But I wanted more than justice. I wanted clarity. I wanted to see her eyes when she realized who I was. I spent the next morning crafting a new identity. Jennifer Ross, financial consultant, private wealth advisor. I built a fake email signature using a real firm's branding, created a burner phone, and wrote a message that felt just credible enough to trigger greed. Subject, investment opportunity. Referral from A. Kane, Ms. Hartley. I was referred to you by Mr. Kane, who mentioned you might be interested in diversifying some recent assets. I specialize in high-yield short-term portfolios with private clients. Would you be available for a brief consultation this week? Jennifer Ross. I didn't have to wait long. 2 hours later, her reply came. Melissa. Of course, Adrian spoke highly of you. Tomorrow afternoon works? Perfect. When I hung up the phone, thunder rolled over the lake. It sounded almost like applause. The next day, I drove to the city dressed for the part. Tailored suit, hair swept up, designer bag. My father used to say confidence was 90% costume, 10% conviction. I had both now. The cafe I chose for the meeting sat on Riverside Drive, a public space with security cameras and good lighting. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a full view of the entrance. When Melissa walked in, every head turned. She wore a fitted cream blazer, sunglasses too large for her face, and a scent that screamed new money. Jennifer, she said, offering her hand with a rehearsed smile. Melissa, lovely to finally meet, I replied, shaking it. Her skin was cool and perfectly smooth. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please. Once she sat down, I began the performance. Adrian mentioned you'd recently come into a substantial sum, I said casually, opening a folder filled with blank papers to look official. Before we proceed, could you clarify the nature of those funds? I need to understand any risk exposure. Her lips curved. Adrian told you about our arrangement? He mentioned you were partners, I said carefully. Business partners, yes. She leaned in conspiratorially. We've been doing this for years. He finds the right client. I handle logistics. I'm the organized one. Impressive, I murmured, feigning admiration. She smirked. It's not difficult once you know what to look for. People are predictable when you give them love, especially women. Something inside me went cold. And your current client? I asked. His wife, Melissa said without hesitation, swirling her latte. You wouldn't believe how easy she is to fool. Signed everything he gave her. She's in Paris right now, completely oblivious. By next week, the company's ours. I kept my face neutral, even as my pulse thundered. You must feel invincible. Oh, it's thrilling, she admitted. All that money, and she has no idea. Adrian says he's doing her a favor. She's too uptight to enjoy it anyway. My jaw ached from keeping my expression polite. And afterward? We'll disappear. Cayman Islands. Maybe Bali. She smiled, almost wistfully. She'll never even know what hit her. I let a pause hang between us before I reached into my bag. Melissa, I said softly, sliding a photo across the table. Do you recognize this woman? She looked down. Her smile froze. The picture showed me and Adrian on our wedding day. Her eyes darted up, widening as the truth clicked into place. You? Me, I said, dropping the act. I'm the wife. Color drained from her face. She stood so fast her chair toppled over. You can't. Sit down. My voice cut through the cafe's soft music like a blade. She hesitated, then obeyed. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to tell me everything. Every account, every forged document, every cent you stole. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you're the only one who takes the fall. And you'll be spending your next 20 years remembering this moment. Her eyes shimmered with panic. You don't understand. Adrian, he said he'd handle it. Adrian's real name is Kane. I know his record. I know your company's. I know about Jennifer Adams. She gasped. You don't know what he's capable of. Oh, I do. I leaned forward. But so do you. And I have everything recorded. I tilted my head toward the corner security camera. This entire conversation, every word, every confession, it's all on video. Her breath hitched. What do you want? The truth. And she gave it to me. Maybe it was fear, maybe relief. But she spilled everything. The offshore accounts, the staged paperwork, the fake signatures. She even told me where they planned to transfer my company's assets once the sale went through. When she finished, I stood gathering my papers. Thank you for your cooperation. She grabbed my wrist. Wait, you said you'd help me. Tell the police I cooperated. I looked down at her perfectly manicured nails clutching my sleeve. I lied. Then I walked out. Outside, the rain had started again, soaking through the city streets. The air smelled like ozone and justice. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, my phone vibrated with a message from Jade. Jade. Got the bank confirmations. Money trail confirmed. Offshore accounts frozen as of 3 p.m. Courtesies of a friend at the bureau. I smiled for the first time in days. Melissa had just handed me the final piece, and Adrian Kane had no idea the game he'd built was collapsing from within. 3 days left. I drove back to the lake house in silence, windshield wipers slicing rhythmically through the rain. Melissa's voice still echoed in my head, her casual cruelty, her laughter when she spoke about me as if I were some oblivious obstacle in her way. The image replayed on a loop, her pale face when she realized who I was, the way her confidence cracked like glass. For the first time in days, I didn't feel helpless. I felt sharp. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, thunder rolled over the lake like applause. I killed the engine and sat in the stillness, rain drumming on the roof of the car. My hands were steady now. The fear that had gripped me days ago was gone, replaced by focus. A plan was forming, clear, precise, ruthless. Inside, I spread out my notes on the dining table, every document Melissa had referenced, every bank account number, every date she'd given me. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light, reflecting off the window like a second moon. The storm outside was building, wind sweeping through the trees, the lake turning to liquid iron. It matched the energy rising in me, unforgiving, uncontainable. I called Jade. You got her, she said before I could even speak. I saw the security footage. She confessed to everything. She did, I said quietly, and I got it all on video. Good. The Bureau will love that. I've already passed the evidence package to my contact. They're verifying the accounts you flagged, Cayman Islands, Zurich, the Miami Shells. But Juanita, they'll need time, a few days at least. Days we don't have. Exactly, Jade hesitated. What's your next move? Take back control. Freeze what's mine, block what's his, and make sure he walks right into his own trap. Juanita, I'm done reacting, Jade. It's time he reacts to me. She exhaled softly. Then I'll make sure you have cover. Just don't do anything that'll make you end up in a courtroom next to him. I won't, I said, but even I wasn't sure it was true. By midnight, I had the skeleton of my plan written out in neat bullet points on yellow paper. Step 1, protect their company. Step 2, protect my mother. Step 3, destroy Adrian Kane. The first two required precision. The last required imagination. I started with my company, Westmore Analytics, the only thing I had left of my father. Adrian had been trying to worm his way into ownership for months, using the forged paperwork Melissa mentioned. If he filed those fake documents with the state, he could stage a hostile takeover. I couldn't let that happen. I called Gerald, my corporate attorney, at 6 a.m. He was gruff, loyal, and used to my early morning emergencies. Juanita, you do realize it's Sunday? I do, and by tomorrow, everything I own could belong to someone else. So I need you to listen carefully. By the time I finished explaining, his grogginess had vanished. You're telling me your husband, if that's even his real name, filed fraudulent transfer documents for controlling interest in your company? Yes, and I have evidence of forgery. He plans to present them to the board Monday morning. I'll file an emergency injunction today, Gerald said. That'll freeze any ownership changes until we can get a judge's ruling. Good. Make sure it's sealed. No leaks. Juanita, he said after a moment, voice softening, I know what this company means to you. We'll protect it. I closed my eyes. Thank you. Next, my mother. I called the bank's legal department directly this time. I told them I had proof of identity fraud and financial exploitation, complete with documents and names. When I mentioned federal interest, they didn't argue. By noon, the foreclosure was placed on hold pending investigation. Her house, our house, was safe. I allowed myself one deep breath before moving to step 3. Destroy Adrian. I opened the folder labeled Evidence, Kane. Melissa's confession. Jade's background checks. The financial transfers. The photo of Adrian's mugshot. It was all there, stacked neatly like ammunition. But I wasn't going to simply hand him to the authorities. That would be too easy, too clean. He needed to feel it. Every ounce of betrayal, every flicker of humiliation he'd ever inflicted. He needed to stand in a room surrounded by the very people who once admired him and realize, in an instant, that he'd lost everything. That's when I decided. Monday morning, the board meeting. He'd expect to stroll in with his forged documents and take my company. Instead, he'd walk straight into a federal sting. Monday morning would be the climax. But before that, I needed proof that no one could refute. Physical evidence. The kind that would end any argument in court or on live television if it came to that. Adrian's office held the key. Literally. He kept it locked, claiming it contained confidential client files. I'd never questioned it. Now I knew better. He always played golf on Thursday mornings. Every week at 9:00 a.m., sharp. Rain or shine. Routine was his arrogance showing. That would be my window. I glanced at the clock. It was Sunday afternoon, less than 24 hours. I drove into the city that evening, staying in a hotel under a fake name. I used the burner phone to text Jade my location. Tomorrow 9 a.m., I wrote, going in. She replied instantly, be careful and record everything. Thursday morning. From my car down the street, I watched as Adrian stepped out of our house, golf clubs slung over his shoulder. He was humming, as if the world hadn't already begun closing in on him. He loaded the clubs into my car, adjusted his sunglasses, and drove off without a care in the world. I waited 15 minutes, then I approached the house. The key slid easily into the lock. The smell hit me first, his cologne, faint and expensive, mixed with the sterile tang of air conditioning. Everything looked the same, yet completely foreign. The kitchen island where we'd eaten breakfast together, the couch where we'd watched movies, all of it suddenly meaningless props in his performance. His office door was locked, just as expected. I knelt, the lockpick kit Jade sent resting in my palm. My fingers moved with surprising steadiness. Click, click. The lock gave way. Inside, the room was immaculate. Polished wood, neatly aligned folders, an expensive globe in the corner. On the desk sat a single black folder labeled in gold ink, Project Westmore. My name. I opened it. Emails, printed, dating back nearly 9 years. Messages between Adrian and Melissa discussing me in cold, transactional language. Target secured. Estimated net worth 4.8 M. Emotional vulnerability high. Father recently deceased. Proceed carefully. She's cautious but idealistic. Trust building underway. Engagement within 12 months. I flipped through page after page, my stomach hollowing. Plans, dates, transfers, and then photos. Me sleeping, me working at my desk, me crying after my father's funeral. He documented every moment, like a scientist observing an experiment. At the bottom of the stack, a printed journal entry in his handwriting. Told her I loved her this morning. Almost laughed saying it. Another week and she'll sign the company documents. God, she's so easy to read. Something inside me fractured and then reformed, sharper than before. I took photos of everything, uploaded them to the cloud, and backed up copies to 3 encrypted drives. Then I kept digging. A drawer labeled Legal held forged contracts, power of attorney documents, and wire receipts linking Melissa to the offshore accounts. Another contained medical papers, mine. He'd highlighted one line from a past checkup that read mild anxiety, prescribed low-dose medication. Next to it, in his handwriting, useful if we need to discredit her later. He'd planned to make me look insane if I caught on. The rage came slow and quiet this time. No shaking, no screaming, just a steady burn. That's when I saw it. A thin blue folder buried under tax records. Inside were printed flight confirmations. 2 tickets to the Cayman Islands for next Wednesday. One under his real name, Adrian Kane, and one for Melissa Hartley. He was leaving right after he ruined me. Not anymore. I took the folder, scanned everything with my phone, and placed it back exactly as I'd found it. The room looked untouched when I locked the door behind me. As I stepped outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. It was the first I'd seen in days, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like revelation. In the car, I opened my recorder. Evidence log, I said aloud. Collected proof of premeditated fraud, theft, and identity manipulation. Targets: Adrian Kane and Melissa Hartley. Estimated total theft, $2.7 million. Next step, bait him into exposure. I stopped recording. My reflection in the rearview mirror stared back at me, hair disheveled, eyes cold, lie. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter, and my prey had no idea he was already bleeding. Sunday came like an exhale I hadn't allowed myself. The city felt smaller, somehow compressed by the weight of the plan I had set in motion. I moved through it with a single-mindedness that surprised even me. Phone calls, last-minute confirmations, a quiet choreography of people who believed me and people who couldn't afford not to. My calendar was a map of contingencies. Gerald's injunction filing confirmed for Monday. Jade's contact at the bureau ready to coordinate a sting. Veronica's house, my lake house, cleared for longer if I needed to disappear. Each box checked made the knot in my chest loosen by a fraction. But the work that steadied me most wasn't legal maneuvering. It was human. The victims mattered. The faces and names of the women Adrian had ruined were not collateral. They were stakes. I had to meet them, listen, and make sure they knew this was not only my fight. If justice was to be more than satisfying, it had to be communal. It had to rebuild. I drove out that afternoon to a part of town that wore its neglect like a second skin. Striped awnings, a laundromat with a blinking sign, a cafe with cracked tile. Caroline Fletcher's apartment building sat between a pawn shop and a clothes florist, the kind of place where you could be invisible and no one would notice. Jade had found her by following old bank records and the faint, stubborn trail of a woman determined to survive. Caroline opened the door wearing slippers and a cardigan like armor. She looked like someone who had been built back up from rubble, stronger for the labor, but haunted. Her eyes widened when she recognized me, not with celebrity, but with recognition of another kind of survivor. Juanita? Her voice was small but steady. Yes. I held out my hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her grip was like a rope, solid and real. We sat at her small kitchen table. It smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. "I saw the news," she said after a moment, "about the arrests. You were brave to come forward," I said. "You helped make this possible." It wasn't flattering. It was the truth. She pressed her lips together, as if to hold the memory of what happened in a cell she controlled. She told me everything. How Adrian, then known by another name, had courted her with flattery and a veneer of stability. How he'd set up meetings as chance, but they were rehearsed. How he moved her accounts under the pretense of better returns, how checks went missing, how her house sold, and she woke up to paperwork she didn't understand. Her fingers trembled when she touched a scar on her wrist, and she laughed. No mirth, just air, at how he told her she didn't know how to handle money. "He told me it was protection," she said, "that he was doing what men like him do, fixing the mess women inherit. I didn't want to fight. I thought maybe I deserved to be taken care of." Her face shut like a book. "I lost everything. I lost my business. I lost the person I thought I was." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry he did that to you." She nodded. "Do you think he's evil?" she asked simply. I thought of his meticulous spreadsheets, the emails where he referred to targets as projects and women as assets. Yes, but evil is also organized. He's a system. We have to dismantle the system. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Help me tell them everything," she said. "I don't want any other woman to go through this." We spent hours building her statement. I wrote things down she hadn't remembered, timelines she'd blurred, and details she'd dismissed as unimportant. We turned memory into evidence. By the time I left, she stood straighter, maybe because the telling had unburdened her, or because the knowledge that someone else was fighting made her less alone. I paid her taxi fare, left her with printed copies of the evidence, and told her the Bureau would contact her for testimony. On the drive back to the lake, I kept thinking about Jennifer Adams, the woman who had been so crushed beneath the same machine Adrian and Melissa ran that she chose to step away entirely. The thought of her name still made rage come up like bile. I couldn't give her back her life, but I could make sure her death wasn't in vain. Caroline's cooperation meant her story would be heard, a small, important reparation. That night, I reviewed everything again. The files filled 2 encrypted drives and a physical binder I kept within eyesight. Some people collect art. I collected proof. The binder had Adrian's old mugshot, Melissa's emails, flight itineraries, bank statements, the recorded conversation from Riverside, scans of the forged company filings, and the notes from my doctor's file that had been taken out of context for gaslighting purposes. The journal entries, his casual contempt written like grocery lists, still made bile rise. At 10 p.m., FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres called. Her voice was pragmatic and cool, the kind of voice that puts you on the phone because both of you are in a private war against time. "We've got the assets frozen," she said. "Melissa is flagged. We're coordinating with Miami and Zurich to lock down transfers. We'll be ready Monday. But Juanita, this is delicate. I need you to stay in character. Let us do the arrest. Let us get the warrants." I know. I wanted to tell her I'd already baited Melissa into confessing and that I had recorded it, that I'd walked into his office and photographed the Project Westmore folder. I didn't. Instead, I said, "We're aligned. I'll be at the board meeting Monday morning." Her silence was a careful assessment. "Good. We'll move at the moment you present the paperwork." A plan, timing, precision. That's what Rebecca offered, and I took it like a map to salvation. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time and let the exhaustion find me. Not the numbness I'd felt in the first days, but a deep, clean fatigue that made my limbs heavy and my mind clearer. Maybe it was because the weekend's work had turned my grief into action. Maybe it was because I'd finally translated pain into movement. Either way, I slept like someone who had done what needed doing. Sunday bled into Monday before I knew it. I dressed in the suit I'd reserved for battlefield negotiations, a slate gray sheath that made me feel like armor. Veronica's lake house key was in my pocket, but the key I carried now wasn't metal. It was the knowledge that I had allies. Gerald on standby, Jade watching receipts, Rebecca ready to move, Caroline willing to testify, and the evidence stacked like a dam across their plans. I stopped at the corner cafe and sat alone while the city woke. I sipped coffee and watched people pass. Neighbors, commuters, lovers with dogs. A man with an umbrella passed by and smiled like he owned nothing. For a strange moment, I considered what I would do after. Would I rebuild? Would I leave? Would I forgive? The answers hovered like early light. Maybe all of them, maybe none. At 9:45 a.m., I walked into Westmore Analytics. The board members were assembled, faces practiced for crisis. Gerald sat to my left, thin and resolute. Jade had texted that an agent would be in the lobby, and Rebecca Torres had confirmed they'd coordinate quietly. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper, the smell of legacies that had survived neglect. I took my seat at the head of the table and felt the weight of my father's name settle across my shoulders like both inheritance and obligation. My phone buzzed once. Gerald. His text read, "Court injunction filed. Bank account secured. Agent Torres en route." I exhaled. Outside, somewhere in the city, Adrian got into his car. He thought he'd won. He thought he had Monday in his pocket, a ceremony of fraud ready to coronate him. He had no way of knowing how many maps I'd drawn, how many allies I'd assembled, how deep the trail led. I rested my hands on the table and waited for the rest of the world to catch up to the one I'd been living in for days. At precisely 10:02 a.m., the conference room doors at Westmore Analytics swung open with a metallic thud. The sound cut through the low hum of murmured conversation, silencing the board. I looked up slowly, every inch of me composed, my hands folded on the polished mahogany table. Adrian stood in the doorway, framed by the glass and sunlight, like a man stepping into his own reflection. His hair was perfectly combed, his navy suit pressed to perfection, his smile broad and confident, until he met my eyes. "Juanita," he said, voice smooth as oil, "you didn't tell me about this meeting." I kept my expression neutral. "It's a board session, internal matters." "Internal matters?" He laughed lightly, stepping forward, waving a folder. "I'd say it's more than that. We have some housekeeping to finalize." He placed the folder on the table with theatrical care. The gold letters on the cover gleamed. Corporate transfer documentation. My heart thudded once, hard, but my face betrayed nothing. The other board members glanced between us, unsure of what script they'd just walked into. Adrian's confidence filled the room like toxic gas. Smooth, invisible, deadly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said evenly. "Oh, no misunderstanding," he replied, smiling wider. "You see, per these documents," he tapped the folder, "Westmore Analytics is now under my majority ownership. Your signature's right there, darling." He looked at me with mock affection, as if I were a naive intern he'd just outsmarted. The word darling made bile rise in my throat. Gerald, my lawyer, leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Bennett." "Kane," I said, cutting him off. "His name is Adrian Kane." The room stilled. Adrian's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" I stood slowly, letting the moment stretch.
"You didn't think I'd find out, did you? The sealed records from 2016, the 3-year federal prison sentence for fraud and identity theft, the name change filed under a Florida alias."
A murmur rippled across the table. Adrian tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "That's absurd." "I thought so too," I said, "until I got the proof." I reached into my briefcase and laid out a neat row of documents, each one a weapon sharpened by sleepless nights. Mugshot, court transcript, Melissa's recorded confession, financial statements tracing millions through shell accounts, and finally, the journal page labeled Project Westmore. Gasps filled the room. Adrian's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous, fabricated." "Then by all means," I said, sliding a USB drive across the table, "play the recording." Gerald connected it to the screen. The speakers crackled to life. Melissa's voice filled the room, clear, careless, devastating. "We've been doing this for years. He finds the right woman. I handle the logistics. She signed everything he gave her. She's in Paris right now. By next week, the company's ours." Every head in the room turned toward him. The silence afterward was suffocating. Adrian took a step back, hands raised, a flicker of panic breaking through his veneer. "This is entrapment. You have no right to—" "Entrapment?" I interrupted. "You mean like convincing my mother to sign over her home? Like forging documents to make it look like I sold you my company? Like draining every cent from our accounts while telling me you loved me?" His composure shattered. "You were supposed to be gone. You weren't supposed to—" He caught himself, but it was too late. "Hear you?" I finished for him, voice low. "But I did. Every word, including the part where you said I was boring. Frigid, pathetic. The board members looked horrified. Gerald cleared his throat, but before he could speak, the door opened again. 3 figures entered. 2 men in suits and 1 woman with a badge clipped to her jacket. Rebecca Torres. "Mr. Adrian Kane," she said, her voice cutting clean through the tension. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines." Adrian froze. His eyes darted to me, then to the agents, then back again. "Juanita, please, tell them. This is a mistake. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. The agents moved forward, reading his rights as they cuffed him. His voice grew louder, desperate. "Juanita, you can't do this. We built this together." I stood as they pulled him toward the door. "You built nothing," I said quietly. "You stole. From me, from my mother, from women who trusted you. But that's over now." His expression shifted from pleading to hatred. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You think this makes you strong?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "No. Surviving you made me strong. Exposing you just makes me free." The agents led him out. His protests echoed down the hallway, fading until all that remained was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant click of cameras from the press outside. For a moment, no one spoke. The board sat frozen, disbelief written on every face. Finally, Gerald cleared his throat. "Well," he said, voice trembling slightly, "shall we continue the meeting?" A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the room, but mine didn't come. I just exhaled and sank back into my chair, the weight of years finally peeling off my shoulders. Rebecca lingered behind as her team escorted Adrian away. "You did well," she said quietly. "Most people would have run." "I did run," I admitted, but then I turned around. She nodded once, as if she understood perfectly. "We'll need your statement, of course, and the original copies of the evidence." "They're yours." I handed her the binder. "Every page is authenticated." Her gaze softened. "You know, not many people catch predators like him. You saved lives, Juanita." "I just saved what was left of mine," I said. As she left, I caught a glimpse of Adrian through the glass lobby, head down, hands cuffed, photographers flashing. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. He turned his head just before they pushed him into the car. Our eyes met. I didn't smile, but he knew. He knew. The woman he'd underestimated had dismantled his empire piece by piece. When the police car pulled away, the sky broke open outside. Bright, clean sunlight flooding through the glass walls of the building. The light hit my reflection in the conference table, and for the first time in months, I recognized the woman staring back at me. Not the victim, not the wife. The survivor. I turned to the board. "Now," I said calmly, sliding my notes forward, "about the restructuring we actually will be doing." The trial lasted 8 months. 8 long, meticulous months where every detail of Adrian Kane's double life was dissected under fluorescent courtroom lights. The journalists called it the marriage con of the decade. They loved the irony. The husband who stole everything from the CEO wife. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't see the wreckage that came before the headlines. I sat through every hearing, every cross-examination, every objection. Some days I wore the same gray suit I'd worn the morning he was arrested. It had become a kind of armor. Other days, I wore black because it felt like a funeral. And in some ways, it was. Adrian's lawyers tried everything. They claimed I'd been complicit, that I'd agreed to the transfers and turned on him out of greed. They painted Melissa as the true manipulator, the femme fatale who seduced a vulnerable husband. But the evidence was too strong. My documentation, the emails, the recordings, his own handwriting, mocking my trust. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 23 years in federal prison. Melissa got 12. When the sentence was read, Adrian didn't look at me. Not once. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, as if holding on to the last vestige of control. But control had already left him. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs, microphones, questions shouted over one another. "Juanita, how does it feel? Do you forgive him? Will you rebuild?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Because forgiveness wasn't the point. Freedom was. Over the following months, I rebuilt in silence. The noise of the trial faded, replaced by the quiet work of restoration. I paid off my mother's mortgage entirely and moved her into a smaller house by the coast, a place with sunlight, a garden, and no ghosts. I set up a trust in her name so no one could ever touch her finances again. Westmore Analytics survived the scandal. Not just survived, it thrived. The board rallied behind me. Clients who'd once whispered about the fraudster CEO came back when they saw how transparently I handled everything. Within a year, our valuation tripled. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adrian had tried to take my company, and in destroying him, he'd made it stronger. As for me, I didn't date. I didn't even think about it. The idea of trust felt abstract, like a language I used to speak but could no longer pronounce. Instead, I founded the Westmore Foundation, an organization offering free legal counsel and financial recovery for victims of fraud and coercive relationships. Caroline was one of my first hires. She got certified as a trauma counselor and began working with women like us, women who'd lost everything but refused to stay broken. We even managed to locate the family of Jennifer Adams, the woman who hadn't survived him. Her sister cried when I handed her a settlement check from the recovered funds. "It doesn't bring her back," I said softly, "but it means her story mattered." She hugged me for a long time. It took nearly 2 years before I visited Adrian again. The prison was cold, industrial, a world of gray concrete and controlled air. He looked smaller somehow, hair thinning, shoulders hunched. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. "Juanita," he said when they brought him into the visitor's room, voice raw, "you didn't have to come." "I know." He studied me for a long moment. "Why did you?" "To see it," I said. "To remind myself it's real, that you can't hurt anyone else." He laughed weakly. "You won. Isn't that enough?" This was never about winning. "Then what?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "It was about ending the cycle, about every woman you broke before me, and the ones you'd have found after. You turned love into a weapon. I turned truth into justice." He stared at me, eyes glossy. "You still think you're better than me?" "No," I said, "just stronger." When I stood to leave, he said quietly, "You still wear the necklace I bought you." I touched the chain around my neck, the one I'd replaced with a tiny silver key pendant. "No," I said, "you gave me gold. This one opens the safe where I keep your confession." His face crumpled, but I was already walking away. Years later, I still wake up some mornings expecting the chaos, the hidden accounts, the betrayal, the firestorm. But then I open the curtains, and the world is calm. My penthouse overlooks the bay. The sun rises in slow ripples across the water, and for a moment, I believe in peace. I keep a single photo on my desk. Me, my mother, Caroline, and 3 other women the foundation helped. We're smiling. Not the forced smiles of survival, but the small, quiet ones that come when life starts to make sense again. I'd almost stopped looking for ghosts when I saw him. It was a Saturday morning. I was at a cafe downtown, my laptop open, editing a proposal for the foundation's expansion. Across the room sat a young woman, late 20s maybe, pretty, nervous, clutching a small purse. Across from her, a man leaned forward, charming, confident, every gesture rehearsed. I recognized the performance instantly. He touched her hand as he spoke. She blushed. His phone buzzed, and he turned it over just enough that she couldn't see the screen. The move was perfect. Too perfect. Something inside me went cold. I rose, coffee cup in hand, and walked toward them. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, smiling politely at the woman. "But did you go to State University? I think we had Professor Morrison's business ethics course together." She blinked, confused. "No, I went to Central." "Oh," I said lightly. "My mistake." I reached into my bag and handed her a card. "Well, if you ever need advice about business or investments, call me. Westmore Foundation. We help people manage risk." The man's eyes flicked to the card. He read my name and froze. Just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. That flicker of recognition, of fear. The same kind I'd seen in Adrian's eyes the moment his lies unraveled. I smiled at the woman again. "Nice meeting you." As I walked out, I saw her glance down at the card, then back at the man. Her expression shifted. Curiosity first, then wariness. She set her napkin down. Maybe she would leave, maybe she wouldn't, but the seed of doubt was planted. Sometimes that's all it takes to save a life. That night, as I watched the city lights shimmer against the water, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant safety, who mistook charm for truth, who thought strength meant silence. She died the day I found out who my husband really was. The woman who survived learned something else entirely. Power isn't in revenge, it's in rebuilding. It's in standing tall after someone tried to bury you. Adrian tried to destroy me, but instead he created me. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all.